Hello, today we have Pike Oliver with us. Pike, welcome. How are you doing today?
Thanks, doing great. Good to see you and excited to have a conversation today.
Yes. So help us to understand your background and how you connected with the UW's real estate program.
Well, I've been around for a while and I got started not so much in real estate, but in things involved with land back in the early 70s. I was a planning student. Initially, I did an undergraduate degree in urban studies, and I worked as a planner for a year doing a land use inventory. Went to grad school at UCLA, pretty much of a kind of policy wonk, not a design program, a lot of economics and that sort of thing. But found myself unintentionally involved in real estate. My first job out of grad school was working on neighborhood preservation in Brooklyn and New York City before it was Hipsterville. And we were doing municipal loans to rehabilitate apartment buildings in neighborhoods throughout Brooklyn, particularly a neighborhood called Crown Heights. I didn't really know anything about things like net operating income, but I learned pretty quickly. And from there, I got involved in policy work and finance work with the state of California, worked on an urban policy document for Governor Jerry Brown the first time he was governor. And through that, met some folks involved with a major master plan community development organization in Southern California called the Irvine Company. And one thing led to another, and a few years later, they offered me a job to work with them on all the environmental issues that were affecting land development. And I did that. And then I spent nearly a decade there and moved from that focus into strategic business planning and infrastructure finance, and learned a lot about how master plan communities are developed. And that's pretty much what I spent most of my time on in all the decades since. Although back when the Great Recession hit, I got a ticket out of it with an invitation to go teach at Cornell University in their real estate program. And that's how I first got involved with education. Did that for 5 winters. My wife said after the 5th winter that was enough. And we decided where we wanted to go and debated between Denver and Seattle. And I won that debate and we came to Seattle. And that was in 2013. And when we got here, I knew some folks who were involved with the program at UW, and they asked me to get involved. And one thing and another was discussed, and there was an initial interest in having me get involved full-time. And I said that I'd had enough of full-time involvement with universities, but I'd be happy to do something on a part-time basis. And that didn't happen right away, but in 2016, I started teaching courses, and that became more involved, became a half-time faculty member, and served in that role up until earlier this year, and actually spent the last year serving as chair of the department. And now I'm advising on a couple of mixed-use development projects and working with a former colleague at the Irvine Company on a book about that organization and how it transitioned from an agricultural empire to a leading master plan community developer in a relatively short period of time in the 1960s.
Good. Well, tell us more about that. I understand it's a book coming out. Is that right?
Well, we don't have a publisher yet, and I don't think this is something that's going to get on the New York Times bestseller list. It'll have a pretty limited niche audience. But yeah, I was really fortunate to have this opportunity. Another former colleague at the Irvine Company, a longtime friend, his name's Mike Stockstill. And the great thing about Mike is that he's a wonderful storyteller and a writer. He started life in news reporting, both newspapers and television, and then got involved in working when I worked at the Irvine Company as a public relations representative, and then went on to do a lot more work in that realm and political and government relations, but has always been a writer. And he had told me years ago that he wanted to write a book about the Irvine Company, but he wanted to wait until a certain individual, one of the heirs of the company, who was a very interesting and somewhat litigious personality, passed from this world, because he was a little concerned that she would file a lawsuit about whatever he might write. And so a few months back, as the pandemic hit in, I was thinking about Mike and wondering if he'd ever gotten started on that book, because this dissident heir had passed on last December. And lo and behold, the next morning, I got an email from Mike before I even contacted him saying, "Remember that book? I'm working on it. Would you like to help me write it?" And so I called him up and we got started, and we're now, I think, 30,000 words into what'll probably be a 100,000 word book. And initially, we were going to try to tell the story about the Irvine Company's evolution into community development all the way from the 1960s to the present. And we soon realized that we probably wouldn't live long enough to get that book done. So we're really focusing on this transitional period between being primarily an agricultural empire into being fundamentally and primarily involved in master plan community development. And that occurred really over not much more than 10 years. And there's a fascinating series of events that came together to cause that to happen, some things that almost caused it not to happen. And it won't be sort of the typical real estate case study. It'll be more about the men and women who are involved and how they came together and made it happen. So that's what we're doing.
Interesting. Look forward to that. Well, I also understand you're working on a redevelopment of a World War II shipyard site in Maine.
Yeah.
How did you get involved in that project?
Well, if you live long enough and don't irritate too many people, you build relationships. And I'm working with a family, the patriarch of which is the husband of a woman that I actually worked with at the Irvine Company back in the late 70s and early 80s. And he, in those days, was a new attorney working on real estate matters. And over time, he became active in real estate development, affordable housing projects, and hotels, and really all kinds of projects over the years. He's originally from Maine, and now he and his children have begun investing in what I would say sort of value add properties in the Portland, Maine area. And then about, I guess just almost 2 years ago now, an opportunity came along to acquire 30 acres of a former World War II shipyard where Liberty ships were built. You've probably heard of stories about Rosie the Riveter, and that's where a lot of Rosies worked during the war, building those ships. And this property has had a few uses on it in the ensuing period, but largely remained undeveloped since the shipyard shut down. And so we're now working on turning it into a mixed-use community. It's a great site. It's next to a park. It's just across the mouth of the river from downtown Portland, Oregon. Has some waterfront opportunity for marina, and it's it's large enough to be really interesting, but small enough to be doable within a reasonable period of time. And it's a lot of fun working on the project. I think in part the role that I got asked to take on, not the formal description, but is to instead of dad having to tell the younger generation all the things they should do, I sort of step in and do that some of the time. And it's a really exciting project. It's great fun to work with great people on great projects. And that's one of those opportunities which really, it's great when you're really excited to get on the Zoom call.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So,
And yeah.
Any other interesting projects you got going right now?
I'm working on another mixed-use project, a conversion of a home and garden center here in the Seattle area. We've been working on strategy for that for a number of years and getting close to starting the entitlement process, and that's exciting. And markets evolved, I think, to really support some fairly visionary things there. And so again, and another group of really great folks to work with, and so that one's fun too. So plenty to keep me busy. This long winding road to retirement has got a few twists and turns in it, and I'm not getting there very quickly, but if you get interesting projects like this, who the heck wants to stop working?
Absolutely. Well, if a publisher or anyone else sees this interview and wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
Well, I still have my UW email address, which is pretty simple, HPO, high-powered official at uw.edu. And then I do have a business that I operate as a sole proprietor, and that is called Urban Nexus, URBANEXUS.com is the domain. So it's Pike at urbanexus.com. Either one of those works. And my cell phone is 206-890-7456. And people can give me a shout. I love to talk to folks, so people shouldn't be shy.
Excellent. Well, great. Well, thanks for coming on with us today, and look forward to seeing the book and all those other projects you're working on come to fruition.
Thanks very much.